this, if you backed up to verse 12, these are the generations of Ishmael, and so that's the genealogy of Ishmael. But here we have these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah his wife conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. And I'll stop right there. And I think she may be the only woman who ever had children struggle in her womb. Is that a correct assumption of the situation? Oh, children kick in the womb? Oh! No, but apparently whatever was happening in her, she realized that it was more than usual, even though these are the only children that she's recorded of having. Women know about these things. So she inquires of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger." And so we see there that God has told us, the older shall serve the younger. Paul quotes this in Romans chapter 9 and verse 12. And we have talked about this in the past, that it is unusual to have someone who is younger who is going to have authority over the older one. It's usually the older one has the birthright, has the blessing, has the inheritance. But God says right here that the older shall serve the younger. And as we get into chapter 27, we might consider that as to her reaction, Rebekah's reaction to that. Verse 24 of chapter 25, when her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak. So they called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel. So he was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Does verse 28 strike you as troubling? How many of you had favorite children? Yes. We never had that problem, did we? Secretly, we do, though, don't we? Some we like a little bit more than others, but to call them favorite. But it's interesting. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Do you think that Jacob and Esau knew this? Absolutely. How do you think they knew that? They know it. Kids are very intuitive. They understand this. My children, if you know my children, they are arguing all the time as to which one of them is the favorite of them. And to the extent to where, and if my daughter's listening right now, I'm on to you, because she has fixed my phone so that every time I go to text my youngest daughter, she has fixed the phone so it says that Rachel is my favorite. I can't type Rebecca because it always says Rachel is my favorite. And they're always going back. If they've hijacked my phone and that's my youngest daughter, and when my oldest daughter gets it, her picture will be on there. They're all about which one is the favorite. You've had that problem before, haven't you? Because children think that the other one gets favored. And the younger they are, the more it seems as though the child is shown favoritism. Well, how come you didn't treat us that way when we were growing up? So there's that, what do we want to call that? Enmity. Sibling rivalry is what they call it. But Isaac and Rebekah, I think they bought trouble by showing favoritism here. Once, when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore, his name was called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is the birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. This will come into play later in his life, within the life of them, but it's also going to come into play. We'll read about this. Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. Yes. I think that it was tradition, but it was also considered part of the law. And remember, you didn't have laws until much later, that you would have written laws about the time of during the Medo-Persian laws, written laws came into play, that you would have them. But it was a tradition that you would have the oldest child. It was expected. Is there any place where you know of that the oldest child always gets the inheritance? Is that true today? Not in your family. And let me turn the camera off so I can tell you how my family's going to do it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've gotten more and more away from it, from that, and it's into the more we've gotten into litigation and the legalistic aspects of it and the law. And I wouldn't even pretend to want to read the laws on all of this. Typically, it doesn't come into play until someone challenges a ruling that says, no, Dad told me or Mom told me that I was supposed to get this when they passed away. And, where there's a will, there's a relative. Did somebody else have their hand up?
Still in the northern regions of Ghana, the firstborn not only inherits everything, but is responsible for the rest of the family.
Yes, as he mentioned, in northern parts of Ghana, that the oldest person inherits and is responsible for taking care of it in a generational sort of way. The more we get into what we might call first world countries, the more the legal system comes into effect. But in older cultures, it's much more in line with that. Does that answer your question? I'm going to take that as a yes. So here, Jacob, do you think there was deception on Jacob's part in this? Sort of. Let's vote on that. Yes, Jacob takes advantage. I don't know if it necessarily was deception as much as it was maybe greed and manipulation. Yes, because he used. If you looked at Esau, what would you say? Did you think Esau had a medical problem? Or was he just hungry? I heard someone say one time that it appears as though he may have had some sort of medical condition to where he was just so famished that he was willing to do anything for it. I think that's about, yeah, just a teenager. I think, well, that's how I feel every day. Exactly. I've heard people say that. We don't know, but all it tells us is that he was willing to give up everything because he thought he was about to die, which is exactly the same way I feel right now. That in another half hour it'll really get vicious. But he was so intent on eating that he says, "I'm about to die. Of what use is the birthright to me?" Now think in terms of, he's not just going to inherit the hope chest. He's not just going to inherit a couple of donkeys. He is going to inherit a substantial, I'm trying to think of everything that he would inherit. And remember that whatever Isaac had, he probably would have inherited from Abraham. And it was told how rich Abraham was. So he had a lot to lose. So Jacob takes advantage of this situation and inherits it. He takes the birthright. Now we're going to go ahead to chapter 27. It says, now that Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, my son, he answered, here I am. He said, behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. And prepare for me delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food, that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies. But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him, and bring a curse upon myself, and not a blessing. His mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son, only obey my voice, and go bring them to me. Seems pretty straightforward, a legal way of going about this, don't you think? Anybody think that's... What is wrong with that situation? Now, in a couple of chapters, we're going to read about the place where Rebekah came from. Remember, Rebekah came from the east in a place called Haran. Probably more to the north, I should say. And the Abraham's steward goes up there to get her and bring her back. And we're going to read a lot about her brother Laban. And when I say the name Laban, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? He's a swindler. He does everything he can to cheat and to steal. And Jacob will say, 10 times you've changed my wages. And so she comes by this, we might say, quite honestly. As we say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And now Rebekah is listening, and why is it that she wants the blessing for Jacob instead of Esau? There's several things that come into play, not the least of which we already read in chapter 25, where it says, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. Now, I don't know how long she has known this, the exact age of what's going on here, and I could look it up and see that from the chart that I have of how old Esau is when this happens. Maybe, he's at the very least, he's probably in his 20s, maybe his 30s. So she has known this for quite a while. Jacob and Esau, no doubt, are grown up at this time. She knows this prophecy that has been told her by God that the older is going to serve the younger. She knows that Jacob is the younger, and she knows that Esau is going to serve him. So, I'll call it chicanery. Her deception, her swindling is going to come into place here, and to say, well, it came from a good spot. It came from a good place in her because she knew that she had to protect what God had said. I don't know if that is always a good place to come from, to plead your case. Well, I knew I was lying, but it was coming from a good spot. It's called situational ethics. But she realizes when she hears, and she's going to set this into motion, which you think at the very least it is affecting that moment in time. But think about how far-reaching this is going to be. If we read back in chapter 25, it said, therefore his name shall be called Edom. And who came from Edom? Edom? They were the Edomites. And the Edomites will have a rather, what's the term I'm looking for? They're not going to like Israel quite so much. So there's a lot of things that are going on here that are going to go, that are being set in motion with Rebekah wanting to really sort of cheat her way into getting the blessing. And now the birthright are the things that you inherit. That's your will. That's what you get physically. But the blessing, how many people have gone through the Jewel Miller film strips, Jewel Miller videos? Well, the first part of history, if I start over here, is called the patriarchal age. And the patriarchal age is called that because a patriarch, what's a patriarch? Tim, I think I called you a patriarch this morning. I did. So you're not really, but the oldest male is the patriarch. And under the patriarchal age, someone like Abraham was the patriarch. And they were in charge of the family. Adam would have been a patriarch. And Noah would have been a patriarch, and Shem, Ham, and Japheth, when they went their ways, would have become patriarchs in the family. So here we have that Isaac, as the patriarch, he's going to get the blessing. And the blessing, because they are in a relationship, a covenant relationship with God, this is the blessing that he says he's going to go before God to give them, that God shall bless them. And in our Western minds, we can't understand, at least I can't understand why once Isaac discovers that he's been cheated, would not say, wait a minute, contract is null and void, and this will not stand up in a court of law. No jury is going to accept this. But he can't take it back. Has anybody ever thought, well, why didn't you just take it back, Isaac? You know, he got it by swindling you. He got it by deception. Maybe I'm the only one that wonders that. Why can't he take it? He's made that blessing. Now, we go forward into the Genesis chapter 48 and 49 to where Jacob blesses the 12 sons. His blessings are not only for their sons immediate, but they are talking about prophecies that go into the future. As he talks about that what is going to be Judah, that the scepter shall not depart from Judah. Well, what is Jacob talking about when he says the scepter shall not depart from you? He's talking about Jesus being the king. He says the scepter shall not depart from there. So there is something inherent in when they give the blessing that it is the stamp of this. It's a stamp given by God. And Isaac knows this. Rebekah knows this. And Jacob and Esau know this as well. In verse 14, so he went and took them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared delicious food, such as his father loved. He takes these tame goats from the herd and has her prepare them, whereas Esau is going to go out and hunt wild animals. Mike Kern, you said you brought venison. If you were to prepare a venison steak next to a beef steak, could you tell the difference? Sometimes. Anybody here know the difference between? Absolutely, yeah. And it has that gamey taste. But Rebekah knows how to prepare it. She knows the secret recipe. I don't know if there's 11 herbs and spices there, whatever she has to do. But Isaac can't tell the difference. She prepares him food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older son, and that were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And the skins of the young goats she put on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. And she put the delicious food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. So he went into his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord," what's that next word? "The Lord your God granted me success." It's an interesting term that he uses there, the Lord your God. And I've talked about this before, that when people are going to identify who this Jehovah God is, they will say he is the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. But here, Jacob does not identify it as because the Lord my God granted me success. It is the Lord your God has granted me success. Interesting to note, as we're going to go further and further into the book of Genesis, we're going to see that Jacob doesn't have a close relationship with God. And he's going to go through a series of trials in which he is going to meet the angel of the Lord. He's going to meet his trials and tribulations. And at a certain point, he's going to understand that this God of heaven, this Jehovah God, is not only the God of Abraham and Isaac, but he is my God too. And his name is going to be changed from Jacob, which means supplanter or deceiver, as some people put it that way. And God is going to change his name to Israel in that. But he says, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near that I may feel you, my son, and to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, who felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, "Are you really my son Esau?" And he answered, "I am." Then he said, "Bring it near to me that I may eat of my son's game and bless you." So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near and kiss me, my son." So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, and here's the blessing, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of the field that my Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven, and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." Why do you think Rebekah didn't tell Isaac that the younger was supposed to serve the older? You would think that he would have known. But if he had known, he certainly would have said to Jacob, not Esau, "Come in that I may bless you." But he doesn't, which leads us to believe that Rebekah did not tell Isaac of the blessing that God had given, that the younger was to serve the older. Now, it says that Isaac was old, and he believes that he has to do this before he dies. How much older does Isaac live beyond this? It's going to be at least another 20 years, because when Jacob and Esau meet after the 20 years that he spends serving Laban, they're going to come back, and then it says that after that they buried their father. So it's at least another 20 years before he's going to die. But Isaac believes that he has to take care of this, thinking that Isaac is old, dim, that he could not see. Behold, I am old, I do not know the day of my death. Well, he didn't, because it's going to be another, as I said, 20 years for this. And so he has the blessing that he's giving to him. And verse 30, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out of the presence of Isaac his father, Esau his brother came in from his hunting. He also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me. And his father Isaac said to him, who are you? He answered, I'm your son, your firstborn Esau. Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, and he shall be blessed. As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. But he said, your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing. Esau said, is he not rightly called Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. And I have a little footnote that says Jacob means he takes by the heel, or he cheats. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. And he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Isaac answered and said to Esau, behold, I have made him lord over you, and all his brothers I have given to him for servants. And with grain and wine I have sustained him. But what then can I do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of the heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. How's that for a blessing? Away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high.
I still don't understand how this is all legally binding. God is, defining itself. I mean, it's not like you're passing around like, okay, you got the sucker now, okay, and, I'm going to see it. No, I mean, you can put a retraction in the local paper. I don't understand how this carries over, how it's, can be, how can you, like, give away a prayer, okay? It includes, and blessing in that. It's not like you're giving, like, even the gift of the Holy Spirit, it wouldn't be part of, such, front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that has been the question that has been asked for nearly 4,000 years now, is how is it that this blessing, and we look at it and we see it from a legally binding, but we also go back to the words that were given to Rebekah. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the older shall serve the younger. Do you think God knew all of this? It's his plan. And do you remember the part where we were reading about Genghis Khan and his descendants in here? No. Why aren't we reading about Genghis Khan? Because certainly he had one of the greatest empires. Well, it hasn't happened, yes. But why is it that we don't read about those great warriors and leaders from China and India, from the Indus Valley and all of that? It's not in God's plan. It's not a part of that plan that he's talking about that leads to our salvation. Think about the size of the book that we would have to have. And I told you about the chart that's sitting on my wall. I have it hung on the wall that shows all of these, all of the languages and all the tribes that come through here. But these are concerned with the salvation that is going to come through Christ. And as we say, as the scoffers often accuse us of, how can your God put up with something like this? How can he allow something like this to take place by deception? Something as important as our salvation. And from the very beginning, what has God allowed man to do? Who said it? Choose, choice, free will. But in all of that, God's will is going to be done. And the fact that he tells Rebekah that the older is going to serve the younger happens because and in spite of what the people have decided on their own. In that. Yeah, Tim.
Jacob really doesn't like part of this. Because he says to his mother that perhaps my father will notice and bring a curse on me and not a blessing. He sees there's something wrong. Sees there's something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mom says, well, I'll take that curse. Well, how do you take somebody's curse? You know, and, you're taking somebody's soul. It's not something you take. Jacob will pay the price.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, you just don't worry. What did she say? Let your curse be on me, only obey me and go and give them the money. So, honor your father and your mother in the Lord. Hasn't been spoken. Well,
Yes, it is one of the most challenging parts, as if there isn't enough challenging parts in the Old Testament. We come to the life of Joseph, and if it's the first time you've ever read the book of Genesis and you come to the part in chapter 37 to where Joseph is taken by his brothers and put into a pit, they tell their father that he's been killed, and you're wondering, where is the justice in all of this? How can this be allowed to happen? Then you go even further, and it says, now he's sold into slavery. He goes down to Egypt and is forced to be a servant. Then he is accused by Potiphar's wife, and he has to go to prison. And then he thinks he has a way out by interpreting the dreams, and the guy forgets about him. The cupbearer forgets about him, and he languishes more in there, and you keep thinking, how can it get any worse? The light goes on to Joseph and says to his brothers in the end, says, you meant it for harm, but God for good, that you may survive through all of this. And we shake our heads sometimes and thinking, what would I do if I were in that spot? But God had it all worked out. That in spite of the deception that Rebekah is going to bring on this, and Jacob does realize, this ain't right. Those Hatfields are going to have it in for us. So it is. It is by wrestle. And I've heard scholars that have wrestled with this. And the best we can say is it is the Lord's will, is what God had planned for it. I'm thinking of the Old Testament book. I want to say that it's Malachi, but it isn't. But when it says that Jacob I love, but Esau I've hated, and men have struggled with that. But he's saying that it was through Jacob that the promise came through, and not Esau, in spite of the salvation of man. And we struggle with it 4,000 years later. But in the end, we know that Rebekah meant it for her own selfish wants and desires. But God turns it around into a blessing. And we'll do that over and over and over again. Well, he says he recognizes. He says the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the arms are that of Esau. So there's something that he recognizes, but